Hi folks, in this video we're going to talk about how you can improve your transition sequence, which will lead to a higher average force along your hand path and increase your club head speed. There are 4 things that we can do to this club in order to change its speed. We can increase the length of our hand path, we can apply a higher average force along that hand path, we can apply a higher average torque to the club, or rotate the club through a bigger angle on the downswing. Those are the 4 things that we can do to change club head speed. Those 4 things will completely predict how fast you will get the club moving. I recently published a study in April 2020 on how those 4 factors are used by amateur golfers to maximize club head speed. And I wanted to figure out what of those 4 factors best determines why particular players might have differences in club head speed. Why might I swing the club at 100 miles an hour and someone else swings it at 120 miles an hour? And it turns out that the average force we apply, that average force that we're applying to this mid-grip point in the hands during the downswing, accounts for over 90% of the variability in club head speed among amateurs. Okay, so that's a massive effect. It might seem kind of obvious. Hey, you want to swing the club faster, you need to apply a higher average force to the club. Well, sometimes the obvious things are true. And what I want to work on today, give you some ideas that you can use to work on at home, is how do we apply a higher average force to the grip of this club. Most of us out there, most amateurs, have the ability already in ourselves to apply a higher average force than we're applying. We're just not doing it. And one of the biggest ways we can do that is improve our transition coordination. You'll notice I'm not using a real club. I'm using a training aid called the Stack. It allows me to change the weights on it. I like speed training, speed movement training, to be done first without a golf club and first without hitting a ball. The face can serve as a governor to slow us down, to slow down those gross movement patterns that we're using to trying to figure out speed, and the ball certainly can. We have this natural tendency to want to make really good contact, which is fine, but it can inhibit our learning of those movements that are going to help us generate speed. Certainly, before we take any of this stuff to the golf course, we need to be able to do it with a golf club and a ball, but the first part of the process is using something without a face and no ball. But I do have a little PRGR monitor there that can track the speed that I'm swinging this club at, because that can really help the learning experience. So what we're going to focus on today is increasing that average force along the hand path, and we're going to do that by improving our transition coordination. Okay, so a long-held biomechanical principle is that we want to move our body parts in a movement in a proximal to distal order. Proximal meaning the ones that are further from the thing we want to get moving fast. We want to move those body parts first, and then we'll get the body parts going that are more distal, closer to the club, out last. So what that would mean is that at the start of the downswing, I don't want all these joint angles to start changing immediately. So let's say this was my top of backswing position. I don't want my pelvis to start rotating at the same time my torso does, and at the same time my arm comes off my chest and my wrist. I don't want to do all that at once, okay? That might get the club head to the ball in the shortest amount of time as possible, but it's not going to get it there with the most speed. What I want to do is have a proximal to distal transition. You can see this is very common amongst all PGA Tour players. So the transition should be a lower body rotation first. And I'm simplifying this. We're just talking about which body parts should move, not necessarily how much they should move linearly, how much they should how much they should rotate, but just the general idea that we want the lower body to be transitioning first. Okay, then that torso is going to be transitioning. Then we'll start to kind of see that lead arm come off the chest a little bit, and the last thing that we'll see will be those wrists. Okay, and I think it's important as we're learning the proper transition to have that higher average force overall in the downswing applied to the grip, is that we don't maximize out the length of our hand path. Even though that can be a great thing to improving club head speed, if we're trying to learn this concept of a better transition, it's helpful if we have a shorter backswing. That allows us to have room to rotate our pelvis relative to our torso, and gives us room to rotate our torso relative to our lead arm, okay? And I don't want my wrist angles maxed out, because I also want to be able to see those forearms, my lead arm, move while the club maybe stays in the same position. And if you watch Bryson DeChambeau now, I think that one of the biggest changes he's made to seeing improvements in club head speed is that transition sequence. It's violent, it's dynamic, but it's also in that right sequence of moving proximal to distal. So, and it's also helpful if we're using something that's relatively light. So I've got the stack here. I've only got 100 grams on it. Okay, I want to feel like I'm definitely in control of this object in order to learn that. And so what I'm going to do is I'm just going to make some really short swings. If you want to watch a John Rahm or a Tony Finau, they've got short swings, but really, really impressive transition sequences. So I want to get to a spot where I feel like I can still have extra torso rotation if I want relative to my pelvis. I can still move my lead arm back more if I wanted to against my torso, and I could still add wrist cock if I wanted to. So I'm going to kind of try to get into this position. That's going to allow me to move my pelvis first, then my torso into my lead arm, and then get a little stretch across all those joints before I move into the downswing. Okay, so just little backswing, and I want to feel like I'm getting that appropriate transition. Okay, kind of think of like a picture of Gary Woodland's move at the wrist with a little bit of down cock, but I want to have that differential across all the joints. Okay, I'm trying to really work on those transition sequences. Okay, hopefully improving that transition sequence will increase your club head speed as well.